KC-135 cleared for take lift. We're normal up to this point. His clearance was proper. He was cleared to take off by the tower. His takeoff appeared normal, though he was quite heavy on takeoff. The gear came up at the appropriate time, shortly after rotation. The flap retraction event took place apparently on schedule, about 500 feet, which is the normal flap retraction altitude. We've ascertained that the flaps, we think, were up because it appears that the mechanism indicates they were up. And when he then transferred from the tower control to Rapcon control, he was cleared to make a left turn and climb on course. Very shortly after that is when the pilot broadcasted Mayday, 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 and gave his call sign. At this point, when Rapcon receives this sort of a message or signal, they automatically give the pilot a landing clearance, and he was cleared to land back at McConnell or at the local commercial airport. And at that time, the Rapcon control asked the aircraft what his problem was, and there was no reply. And very few seconds after that, or maybe a minute or so, was when the crash occurred.
All of a sudden, I heard a loud roar like a jet going out of the sound barrier, I thought. And then the explosion, and it lifted me up out of the chair and threw me across the room. And when I got up and looked out the window, fire was all on the west side of the street. And I hollered for my girl to stay into the kitchen and go out the back door. And so by that time, the fire was in my house, all around my windows, and heat was terrific. It was terrific heat that you could feel coming from at least the west end of your home, which is in my living room and dining room. And when we got outdoors, well, the house next door was in flames. 2 doors from us was in flames, and the one next door was in danger, and so was ours from the heat and also the fire. And then a friend of mine that came up and lived at 17th in Minneapolis, she stated that she was going to catch the bus, and she looked up, and the jet, she thought was a jet, was so low, and she wondered why, and it's so large, just flying so low over homes. And she said it may look like going north. It made a bank to turn around. Then you heard a crack, and then next was the explosion, which you didn't get the
You got here, the roof caved in,
Yes.
and the chief was trapped. Would you tell us just how it came about from what you've heard?
Well, apparently, as far as I know, the firemen had 3 lines in the garage. The fire was up above the ceiling, and they were working on getting hose lines up into the ceiling. And they heard a pop, and they made a run for the doors, and they didn't. Some of the fellows didn't make it. Several of them made it all right, but there were a couple by the door that we found, and then there were a couple farther, about 2/3 of the way in the building.
I understand the chief got word to come to the fire while celebrating his 36th wedding anniversary.
That's what I understand. This was his 36th wedding anniversary today.
What type of problem did this building present in battling the blaze? What were problems you encountered?
Well, apparently this is a normal garage fire with a loft above, storage area, and a mezzanine section. And you can't get to it from the bottom. And apparently the fire was burning above the ceiling between that and the roof. And of course, when the heat builds up to approximately 1,000 degrees, why this softens the beam construction of the roof, and whenever that reaches that temperature, why the beams fail and down it comes.
Chief Carney, this has been a terrible fire, one in which we've lost the chief, Chief Tom McGoy. I know you were very close to him, not only personally, but at the time of the tragic accident. Could you kind of relate to us last few minutes of his fighting that terrific fire?
Well, what happened was, I came in just before McGoy. We had located the fire between the ceiling and the roof. We had one line in there with 3 men on it, and we were pulling the ceiling. McGoy showed then just shortly after that, and he came over, and we had decided that we wanted to use what we call a 2.5-inch applicator that we could put up in that ceiling. So we stepped back outside, he'd given orders to get the 2.5-inch applicators and get them in operation. We went back in, and the men were pulling more ceiling, and Tom said, let's move back just a little to the south and pull the ceiling down here so we can cut the fire off. And then Tom headed east back into the building to size up just a little more. And he had made it back to the east half of the building and started back west. Well, we had one crack. That's all the warning we had.
Just a second or two warning, right?
It really was just a split second. So the natural instinct, you run for the nearest exit. Well, I cleared the building, probably a half a step ahead of it, turned back around to see if anybody that I could grab wasn't. Then this one man hollered for help. Well, this was Engine 5's crew. We pulled out the captain, and apparently he was all right. And we pulled another man out right quick, and apparently he was all right. But the third member of that crew was pinned by one of the beams. Chief McGoy was caught almost 2/3 of the way back in the building. There was no way in the world we could get to him. And his driver was just approximately about 20 feet south of where the chief was. And our chief inspector was in